Okay, everyone, we're going to start letting folks in right now, and we'll be going live. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Kofi Annan, president of the Activated People. In July, the Activated People led an effort to transform the way policing is done in Virginia by bringing together over 50 different organizations and hundreds of residents, including many of you on this call, to form the Virginia Coalition for Transforming Police. The coalition members conducted several town halls, met with legislators, helped draft legislation, testified before in support of the legislation during the 2020 Virginia General Assembly special session. And so tonight, we're going to have a panel discussion with a few fellow activists to review what was accomplished with regards to police reform during the special session. Our panel will include TAP Vice President and Rise for Youth Executive Director Valerie Slater, the Virginia ACLU Legislative Director Ashna Khanna, Princess Blanding, the Director of Justice and Reformation, and the brother of the late Marcus David Peters, for whom the Marcus Alert was named after, and the Justice Forward Virginia Director Brad Haywood. Welcome to all the panelists, and a welcome to all of the viewers. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'll serve as a moderator, but if the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we will get to those following the formal part of the program. Without any further ado, I'd like to get into the topic of defunding. The topic of defunding is a very polarizing term, as you all are very well aware, that pretty much neither party has shown the willingness to touch. So I'll start off with you, Valerie. Before we get into like what happened during the special session, would you be willing to clarify to our audience what this term means to you, in your opinion, and then maybe touch on some of the aspects of defunding that you thought were or were not addressed?
Thank you, Kofi. Again, Valerie Slater. And so, interesting term. You're absolutely right. So many unwilling to touch it. What does defunding mean? It's not about stripping all dollars away from police departments and pouring it into different spaces. It's much more about ensuring that we are using dollars in the most effective way and the most beneficial to the community. That means we aren't dispensing police or we aren't calling police to do everything that a community needs, that we recognize that when someone is in the midst of a mental health crisis, we ought to call on those who are trained to deal with mental health provision, and that there are just too many ways that we have given authority to police officers that we need to rethink. We need to begin to recognize all of the tools in our toolkit and stop using the police as a one-size-fits-all. If we are going to be truly good stewards of all of the Commonwealth's dollars, that means that we're going to evaluate all of the ways in which communities have needs. We have a Department of Human Services. We have, we have so many different state agencies because we recognize all of the different areas in which we have to address the needs of Virginians. And so we need to think about that when we are addressing the specific needs at the community level and stop using police in all of those instances. And everywhere we are able to pull back or to reel in, if you will, the authority and the the ways that we are using police that we should not, and all of the ways that we are able to limit that, then we ought to take the dollars that the police are expending in those areas, and we ought to be using them to empower the agencies, to empower those professionals that are trained to meet those particular needs. That's what defunding is about at the core. And one of the most important ways in the work that I do in Rise for Youth, one of the most important ways that we see that, we have police officers in school. And officers in school, they are being called upon to address issues that often are not a part of what a police officer ought to be doing. They're called on to serve and to protect. And in the instance of schools, we're talking about protecting school children and school staff from harm that most often is coming from the outside. But when police officers are in the buildings, they're being called upon to handle behaviors that ought to be handled by administration, rather than being limited to eliminating threats or keeping children and the staff safe from harm in the criminal sense. We've got to stop doing that. One of the best ways that we could have supported a move in that direction is, again, on the state level. When we look at the dollars that we spend, there are $4.7 million that are spent on supporting SRO programs at the local level. Delegate Kay Corey introduced legislation that would have taken that $4.7 million from the allocation towards police. She left it in the school budget and wanted to create, with that $4.7 million, a pot of money where local school divisions could draw down that money to create mental health provider positions in schools. Now, that's good stewardship of dollars. We recognize that there are communities that are in dire need of more services, and the services that will help to deal with the traumas that children are facing. And that would have been a way that we could have shown, our legislator could have stood behind this idea that we are in the business of educating and creating opportunity for children rather than policing them. And so it was rather disappointing that those budget amendments were not adopted. They were just very disappointing, but pleased to announce that Delegate Corey is amenable to reintroducing those budget amendments in 2021 during the regular session. So I know that I've talked quite a bit, but in essence, that's what defunding is all about. And one of the key areas in which we were very disappointed that our legislators did not take up the charge.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie. The other area that defunding is discussed is making sure that, as Valerie noted, the police aren't being asked to do things that they aren't really equipped to do, especially when dealing with people who are experiencing mental health trauma. And Princess, you unfortunately lost your brother to police violence not too long ago. First of all, I want to again extend our deepest condolences to you and your family. And want to tell you how much we appreciate the fact that you have taken up the fight to make sure that this doesn't happen to other families in Virginia. And but would you, if you don't mind, maybe taking a few minutes to kind of let people understand what the bill that you were fighting for, the Marcus Alert, and how that can help to prevent situations like your brother's from happening.
Sure. Thank you, Kofi. And thank you for the just overall love and support and condolences. As many may know, today is Marcus's 27th birthday. And so, my family and I, in supporting community members, continue to fight, for the Marcus Alert and just to change policing. As Valerie said, we can't expect that the police are going to be able to address everything from A to Z. And so when we talk about defunding the police, we're talking about reallocating funds into areas of community care and safety so that they're better used, as we understand that the police are not equipped to address everything from A to Z, such as mental health. And so on May 14, 2018, my brother Marcus David Peters was teaching he taught a full day of high school biology at Essex High School, where I was the assistant principal at. After he completed his full day of teaching, Marcus headed home to his home in Henrico where he briefly greeted his girlfriend, she needed to return her textbooks. He let her know that he needed to run to his second job at the Jefferson Hotel quickly, but would be back in time to take her to return her textbooks. And that just never happened. What we have been told from the city of Richmond, we saw a chain of events that led up to Marcus's murder, where he was seen entering into the Jefferson Hotel, fully clothed. He drove up, parked his vehicle, walked in, waved to someone. And then based off of the footage that we were shown, that has been released to the public, the video footage becomes very sketchy within the Jefferson Hotel. And we ultimately see Marcus derobing and leaving the Jefferson Hotel completely undressed. I would be remiss if I did not state that I am aware that there is at least one individual who wants to talk, that knows what really went down, but because of politics and corruptions, they don't feel comfortable to. But at any event, Marcus, after he left the Jefferson Hotel, he was seen, based off of the video footage that we were shown, hitting two vehicles, and then ending up off of 95, where his car kind of landed in a grassy area. And we see Officer Michael Nyataki pointing his gun at Marcus's vehicle. And we hear him saying, this person is mentally unstable as we speak. It sounds as if he was dispatching. And Marcus literally gets out of his vehicle and he runs towards the highway, as if he was oblivious of the presence of Officer Nyataki. Marcus then proceeds to do what appears to me as making like snow angels in front of a RV, not disturbing the people there. Again, it's atypical, but he was in his own world, making snow angels. We later on see Officer Nyataki have a taser in one hand and a gun in another, pointed towards Marcus. And it's as if he said something to Marcus, because Marcus pops up and looks directly, he kind of gets out of that snow angel phase, and it's like now he's aware, and he pops up and he, now starts to forward towards Officer Nyataki after Officer Nyataki engaged and escalated the situation instead of waiting for help, which there was a state trooper present on the other side of the highway who quickly got to the scene. We then, are told, and as evident by the autopsy, that a taser was used. Only one of two electrodes penetrated Marcus's body. Therefore, it didn't create a closed circuit, and it was ineffective. And then Marcus was shot multiple times. We were told twice. The autopsy shows 3 bullet wounds to his body. So when we look at the Marcus alert, since 2018, my family and I recognize we can't bring Marcus back. That's just an unrealistic expectation. But what we can do is fight like hell to ensure that anyone else that's that deals with mental health issues, or their loved ones or neighbors, or a person that has autism or some form of an intellectual disability, that they receive help, not death. And since 2018, we have been fighting literally tirelessly to get our local and state legislators to craft a life-saving Marcus alert bill. And what we've seen is that since the uprising in Richmond, everybody had a call to Jesus meeting. And now this is what became a priority to people who have been completely silent. And even after George Floyd was murdered, didn't even want to say Marcus David Peters' name. And so when we look at where we are now, in special session, and I told myself I'm not going to speak about it after this, okay, is that we have a BS bill that is getting ready to come forward, okay? It's public information. It is a watered down, just like all of the other bills that the Democratic Party, which is the majority, and they have the ability to push these reformative bills, these well-needed progressive bills that the community is crying and demanding. They watered it down, and it basically, in my eyes, will yield the same results. It does not put mental health professionals at the lead and clearly specify that police officers are there only as backup and only with non-lethal force. They refuse to put that in the language. It does not address officers. We said that they should not wear uniforms. They should not be in marked police vehicles, because those are triggers to people dealing with mental health crises. Those are triggers to the Black community. Those can be triggers, such as the young boy, the 13-year-old in Utah, who was shot when his mother called last month because he was having a mental health episode. Okay, again, and he has autism. So the presence of a police officer and those sirens can be triggers. So everything that we fought so hard for, it has his name, which is actually a acronym, because we were told you can't put his name in the bill. So we had to come up with something for each letter of his name, even though we have the Amber Alert. Okay, we've been fighting like hell. And what have we gotten? Nothing. And again, and I'm going to be quiet because I know we have a longer program, but we must understand that whether it's the CRB bill or the Marcus Alert bill, it sounds good, but I need y'all to read the language, because it still allows the police officers to do exactly what they did that caused Marcus David Peters not to be here today.
Thank you for sharing, Princess. Yeah, I know this very tough for you to have to recount that story, and again, really appreciate you sharing that and appreciate your candor about what was accomplished with regard to that, even though it has your brother's name on it. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about pretextual stops. It's well known that police could pretty much find almost any justification to conduct a stop. And oftentimes that leads to unnecessary searches, seizures, detentions, and even worse. And so that was one of the things that was addressed, or at least attempted to be addressed during the special session. And so I was going to turn it over to Brad from Justice Forward to maybe touch on a little bit about what the bill that was passed accomplished.
Sure. Thanks, Kofi. Thanks for having me. So Justice Forward Virginia really began the special session with a premise. And I've put it different ways when I've talked to different groups. But basically, people who haven't, let's just put it this way, people who haven't been directly affected by the justice system, they tend to have a pretty surface level understanding of what the problems really are. So, we talk about defunding. People hear the word defunding and then they have this visceral reaction because they don't bother to learn what it means. People hear the word Black Lives Matter. They tend to have a visceral reaction to that because they listen to what they're being told on cable news, or what somebody told them on social media about what Black Lives Matter is in the movement. And I think even the good, like the people who are operating in good faith, tend to come up with a really awkward conclusion about what the nature of the problem is with policing in the United States. They call it, I'll put it this way, the movement is called Black Lives Matter. It's not called Black Deaths Matter. And the reason I say that is there's a fixation on the death part. We think about that if we can just get rid of people dying, then we're just going to be fine. Like you think about the civil rights movement back in the 60s. Was the whole point of that movement just to prevent deaths like Medgar Evers or Emmett Till? Would that have been enough? Was that the whole goal of the civil rights movement? Of course it wasn't. The goal of the civil rights movement was to get racist Americans to start viewing Black people as humans. And really, that's the exact analog with, I think, with Black Lives Matter and with the current criminal justice movement in America. We're not just trying to keep, of course, we're trying to keep, to protect Black bodies, and we're trying to honor Black lives. But the way you honor Black lives isn't just by keeping Black people from losing their heartbeat or losing the breath in their lungs. You honor Black lives and you respect Black lives by not putting Black people in handcuffs, and not putting them in cages and locking them up for the rest of their lives, not depriving them of their liberty, of their communities, of their families, of the things that make a life. And so that's the reason Justice Forward was looking more broadly at the criminal justice system, because you can fix all these things about policing. You can fix training, you can have more training hours. Is the reason, sometimes I think of it this way, like George Floyd died, obviously at the hands of somebody who saw no humanity in him. Would that real problem have been remedied if Derek Chauvin had simply been, had twice the training hours? No, of course not. The problem wasn't that Derek Chauvin wasn't trained well enough. The problem was that Derek Chauvin saw George Floyd as something other than a human being. So that's the problem that we need to get at. And it's really fundamental. And it is so tied in to the whole criminal justice system as a whole. It's really kind of what it's that view, a devaluing of Black life is what drives racial disparities throughout the system, from the moment of arrest all the way to something as serious and severe as the death penalty. That's what is prevalent throughout it. So what Justice Ford wants to look at generally is not just the how polite police are, how gentle they are, how well trained they are, how professional they are. No, we want to change their mission, because their mission is racist. Their mission has been defined especially by the war on drugs. You think about all these policies that we have, we're going to talk about them tonight, policies that are in place that everybody's complaining about. People complain about no-knock warrants. They complain about mandatory minimums. They complain about police military equipment. They complain about driving while Black, pretextual policing. Well, guess where all of those things came from? Guess where all of them came from? They came from one place. They came from the war on drugs. I'm not kidding. So the way we start rolling back these policies and we get back to a point where we're actually treating human beings equally is we start rolling back those policies that were the product of the root cause, right? So that's why I think for Justice for Virginia, pretextual policing really was the top of the list for us. It was the top of the list for us because that is the way you reduce police interactions overall, but especially with Black Americans, because the process starts. All of that stuff we're talking about, whether it's police use of excessive force, to prosecution for misdemeanor offenses or felony offenses, to drug interdiction, to everything else right down the line in the criminal justice system. All those racial disparities often disproportionately start at that moment. It's that moment, especially in a traffic stop. It's the time when anyone in the world is most likely to encounter a police officer. I think more than half of police encounters with citizens come from traffic stops. So we want to get rid of those, get rid of the unnecessary ones, because police are not only trained, not only they have this whole code to allow them to make traffic stops, but they are trained to use it to operate on their hunch, to essentially employ their implicit bias or their explicit bias, and they're given these excuses. And in Virginia, they have these just a list of two dozen absolutely ridiculous excuses for pulling over disproportionately Black and Latinx Virginians, including having loud exhaust, having tint that's too dark, having a third high mount brake light. The third one, like even you got two other working ones, everybody can see those working. The third one's out. Oh, sorry, racist cop can pull you over. It could also pull you over for that little license plate tag light. You may not even know you have one of those, but you have one of those on the top of your tag, the license plate. If that's out, even during the daytime, they can pull you over. Like, how dumb is that? I think the very dumbest was the dangling objects from the rearview mirror. If you have air freshener, the owner of the company that sells all those air fresheners has said that he's probably sold more of those than McDonald's has sold hamburgers. So there's billions of those air fresheners on cars around the world, and you have one on them, a police officer can pull you over. Until this bill goes into effect, the police can pull you over. So this is not the end, and now this is not the final product. We're not done with ending pretextual policing, but what we've done with this bill and what the House and Senate, by God, I don't know how they did it, because they didn't really we had difficulty with everywhere else, but this bill just sort of sailed through both chambers. They got rid of so many of these ridiculous pretexts, and it's awesome. And now you can—
Brad, would you give us a couple examples of some of the things that would no longer be legal?
Yeah, it was the ones that I was just mentioning. So yeah. If you have an aftermarket exhaust system on your car, say you're a car aficionado, as it stands, if you take your factory exhaust off your car and put like a racing exhaust, illegal. You can be pulled over. So they can't do that anymore. Can't pull you over for loud exhaust. Can't pull you over for having what they consider to be dark tint. It's so dumb. They can't do it anymore. I think the dangling objects from the rearview mirror, the tag light, the third high mount brake light, jaywalking now they can't. And I think the most important one, which will help Black Americans, Black Virginians more than any other, is they can no longer stop and search you for the odor of marijuana. People don't realize this, but decriminalization didn't get rid of that. Didn't get rid of it, certainly where I work. They are still definitely stopping cars because they say they smell marijuana coming out of them. They're stopping people on the street. Of course, what do those people look like? They don't look like me. I live in Arlington. They don't look like the people hanging out and the Wilson Boulevard bars and stuff. Sorry, I'm not going to swear. But they're still using this stupid law, and we got rid of it, so they can't do that anymore. Next step, just so you know, in terms of where this is going. In the future, we want to ban police from being able to request a consent search, because that's how the process starts. You pull somebody over for the vehicle equipment violation, and then, you got somebody sitting on that seat thinking, well, I look like Philando Castile. What's going to happen to me today? And police officer trained to exert all of his coercion to get that person to consent. And he thinks, what's going to happen if I don't consent? I might die today. So of course he consents. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. We shouldn't be allowed to use the traffic code as a way to wage the war on the failed war on drugs. We got to get on that and do it next session. It's going to be a bill, I promise. And we're going to get rid of this, in our opinion, the worst police practice in Virginia and in the nation.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're gonna dive a little deeper into what the next steps are and what we need to focus on towards the end of the program. But really appreciate all of your hard work with regard to the pretextual stops, and that's obviously a great bit of news there. So I'm going to open it up to the other panelists. Were there anything with regard to defunding or pretextual stops that, how do you guys feel? I know some things went well, some things didn't, but specifically with regard to defunding and reducing interactions with police, were there any other areas that we thought that they should have probably done a little better job on?
Am I being asked that, or is anyone?
I'll just kind of open it up to the rest of the panel. To anyone on the panel. All right. Oh, go ahead, Ashna. Want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think that I really want to emphasize the importance about marijuana and what the decrim law did and did not do. I mean, when we're talking about racial disparities, Virginia is got the top 5 counties that has the worst racial disparities for simple marijuana possession in the entire country. And we know that this has gone up significantly in the past decade. And so, in some counties like Hanover County, you are 20 times more likely to be pulled over or taken aside for simple marijuana possession than if you are Black, than if you are white in Virginia. And so this is directly, something that needs, marijuana in general and the war on drugs is something that we very much see as something that is a racial justice fight. And that is one way that the mental trauma, it's all connected, right? So like all these pretextual stops, who's in the car, families, and, mental health and trauma has been shown over years to, accumulate. And we really need to address, the racist system itself in order to really prevent those instances from happening. And I think, I really want to give a shout out to Princess and her work as well, because the Marcus Alert bill, with diverting resources and ensuring that the right people are there, to really handle the issues is key. And so we didn't get enough bills that were anything in special session, in my opinion, that would really make a significant impact when it came to diverting resources and really, getting at the root of this issue. And so we really hope to continue pushing legislators to do that in 2021. But I do want to emphasize what did not happen this special session, what needs to happen, and how all these things are so interconnected.
Yeah. Brad, I had a quick follow-up question for you. So does this law banning some of those pretextual stops, does it apply to all law enforcement, including local, sheriff, and state police, or?
Hang on. Does it apply to state police and local police? It applies to any police that are enforcing Virginia law. So yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, I see Delegate Hope on the call. Just want to give a shout out to Delegate Patrick Hope. Rode hard for this bill, got it through. Senator Lucas on the other side also did a great job. So props to them. Go team.
Yeah, thank you.
If I could just add one final thought.
Sure.
Kofi, I just wanted to add one final thought. You know, when we consider the way that especially the marijuana component of the pretextual stop bill, it is going to have such a huge impact for young people across Virginia. You know, when we talk to young people, the number one reason that they give us for being stopped, well, I'm going to give you the top three. You match the description of, there have been reports of break-ins in the area, and I smell marijuana. Those are the top three reasons that walking while Black, walking while Latinx is criminalized in Virginia, those three things. And so this bill is going to be phenomenal in reeling that back. You know, we were doing Know Your Rights trainings and continue to do those trainings in particular communities for young folks and their families. And we've had young folks as young as 12 years old who tell us, I don't know how many times I've been stopped. There's just too many for me to even remember. And we are looking forward to those numbers dropping down to 0. So just so much appreciation for the passage of that bill. We have so much more to do. It's nowhere near enough, but it's a start.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to switch topics a little bit to talk about probably the most important part of all of this, the accountability and oversight. And we're going to start off with civilian review panels. I know there was some work done to try to make those panels a little stronger, a little bit more broadly used. And I'll start with you, Brad. How do you feel that went? And maybe if you could just kind of explain the framework of how civilian review panels work and why it's important and what was accomplished and what was not accomplished during this session.
Sure. So this was also, in addition to being in the coalition's top priorities, it was one of Justice Ford's top 5, probably number 2, I'd say. And it just holds so much promise. As we're finding out, getting any kind of criminal justice reform done on a statewide level is really difficult. So that's why there was a prosecutorial reform movement, because prosecutors are at the ground level, they can make fair choices. And now also civilian oversight follows that same principle. Policing is done at a local level. Police departments ought to, their priorities and how they do their jobs, that should also be determined by the community they serve, because they're supposed to be serving a community. They're not supposed to be policing a community, and I think that's the paradigm we need to get to. And so there are 3 general types. I'll go through this really quickly. 3 general types of civilian oversight. There's a review model where you just review investigations the police already did. That only responds to individual incidents of misconduct. There's an investigation model, which allows the oversight body to actually take over those investigations and not just review them, but do them themselves. And there's an auditing model. The auditing model allows the oversight body to actually review police policies and procedures, budgets, things of that nature, so they can look prospectively into the future and not just react to incidents that already happened. So the bill that we passed is great because it allows all 3 of those things. As it stands in Virginia, all that was allowed was the review model, and the review model is just kind of a joke. The review model is, if you use that alone, it's a joke, because if you've ever seen that meme online, it shows a bunch of cops, like a police brass, and then the text says, "We've investigated ourselves and cleared ourselves of any wrongdoing." That's what the review model is, because the police just investigate themselves. They're all, by the way, professional investigators. So if there are holes that exist in the investigation, they know how to close them. They know how to give that work product over to a body so that they can't find any flaws in it. And in practice, look at the Fairfax Civilian Review Board. I mean, there were a couple dozen, complaints that made it to the review board last year. None of them resulted in any action against any cops. And I mean, God, do you really think that's true, that no cops did anything wrong in Fairfax last year, especially now that we've got one that's been arrested and another one who the Commonwealth's attorney has dressed down publicly? I mean, it happens. So that obviously the review model wasn't getting the work done. So what we have now, and the other principles of good review boards is that they're transparent, so that you can actually acquire information about how the police do their jobs. That they're independent, so police themselves can't be on them, and that they're accountable. So independent, transparent, accountable. Yes, those are the main things. So the bill that was passed is actually really great. Another huge success by the Virginia legislature. There's a broad mandate for oversight authority, and that's determined by localities. It's not mandated statewide. That was something that was a point of contention. We agreed with the people, the bill that actually got passed. We're not mandating civilian review boards. We're not civilian oversight. We're not mandating the form in which it's created. We're allowing localities to decide that. And I think that's really best practice. In addition, civilian oversight, they have subpoena power, which is really important. You can't, review or investigate information that you can't get. So you need, or audit information that you can't get. So they have that subpoena power. No law enforcement officers are going to be allowed on civilian oversight bodies, which is great. And again, there is auditing authority. So they can audit budgets, they can audit they can make budget recommendations. They can also review and audit use of force policies, how complaints are handled, how misconduct is investigated, other policies like things like pretextual policing or broken windows policing or crisis intervention, things like that. It's a really great bill, and there are a lot of localities that are already trying to implement these according to the outlines that have been created by this bill. So another good job on this one for the legislature. So
thank you. I know one of the issues that was debated a lot internally was to whether or not to make these panels mandatory, or whether to just kind of make them empower localities to create those the panels. So can we have maybe a quick open discussion as to why we ended up on not making it mandatory?
I would love to speak on it. I'm going to have to disagree with much of what I just heard. I know many have heard me say this, and I'm not going to stop saying it. The Virginia Democratic Party is the majority in both the House, the Senate, and we have a Democratic governor. That means they have the upper hand during special session, in this upcoming January. So for them to not be courageous and to simply throw us crumbs and expect for us to rejoice is shameful. By making the bill simply enabling, let's translate what enabling means. That means Richmond City Police Department, you have the choice to create an independent civilian review board with subpoena power. Last time I checked, most police departments around this nation are not going to willingly create an effective independent civilian review board with subpoena power. Another thing that this bill is lacking is that it does not mandate that the board members are elected. And by not doing so, you can end up with police officers, on these boards. So it is very disappointing just overall during special session. Of no rejoicing will come from Princess because we have been waiting for over 400 years. And the Democratic Party appeals to the poor people, to Black people, to our marginalized communities. And they have had the opportunity during special session to go ahead and pass robust reformative bills, and they watered down most of them, or they killed them, such as qualified immunity. So there is no rejoice in this way, because again, these bills, such as the Independent Civilian Review Board, by simply making it enabling, we don't see police accountability already. So do we really expect that our police departments are going to say, let's create this board and hold our police officers accountable? We have to be realistic. And again, the progression is not enough, because Black people are continuously being profiled. We're being harassed. We're being dehumanized, okay? We're being brutalized. We're being murdered. So to again leave police, to make this an option, that is unacceptable. And it is not a fearless move by the people who we appointed. I had direct conversations with Senator Heshmi, and I have emails to back it, where I said and broke down why it is dangerous to push the bill the way that she's pushed it. And her response to me, well, this is the consensus of the party. And I said, that's very disappointing that that the Democratic Party only chooses to take the path of least resistance. I was not given a good rationale as to why. It is not okay to say this is what the people want. Knowledge is power. Many people in the state of Virginia did not even know the special session was going on and what was going on in the city of Richmond. I work in Northern Virginia, and many people had no idea what was going on. So what people? Did you really get into the communities and say to the Black people who are being affected by police brutality, is this the type of bill that you want? And I know that the answer is no. I sat on stakeholder calls during special session where there was nobody that looked like me. So again, disappointment. This is a failure on the Democratic Party's end that they will be held accountable for.
Yeah, thank you, Princess. Thanks for throwing some balance in there. Brad, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on the civilian review panel in response to.
I'm not going to take any issue at all with Princess's feelings on this issue. I don't think that's my position to do that. And I absolutely echo her feelings. I think probably the only area I disagree with her might be the civilian oversight, because I think that there were a lot of shortcomings in other areas. We just happen to have the first two bills we discussed to be one, the pretext bill, I think that everybody can celebrate, and then one where we differ. I think apart from the mandate, the mandatory creation, at the very least, the bill that was passed follows like best practices. So, at least we have banned cops from being on them. We've got subpoena power. We've got auditing authority. To me, those are important things. I totally understand Princess's feelings about that, and I'm not going to even bother disagreeing with her.
Can I ask one more follow-up question? I see this question is actually posed in the chat. Will the civilian review panels cover sheriffs as well, or is it only for local police?
I don't think it covers sheriffs yet. I think there were concerns about constitutional issues. I don't really know how. I didn't get enough into the constitutional issue. It kind of sounded bogus to me, like you can get it done. But my understanding is they didn't yet.
Got it. So just going to switch a little bit to talk about qualified immunity, and Ashton, I want to kind of bring you into this conversation here. So as we've seen over and over again, a lot of times police are not held accountable from the criminal standpoint even when they kill Black people. So qualified immunity was one of the recourses to take civil action. That bill failed. Can you explain a little bit about what qualified immunity is and why it's important that it failed?
Yeah, I would say that, just to start off, like I think us and many advocates in the community were really extremely disappointed that this bill failed. When we think about reforming the system and we think about dismantling anti-Black racism in policing, accountability is key. And this is not a value that can be negotiated. You either have it or you don't. And currently, Virginia police are not held accountable for their actions. And we'll get to decertification a little bit later, which is multifaceted, but ending qualified immunity this bill was one way to make police accountable. And so what it exactly, it means is that right now, if you're hurt or you're killed by a police officer, they who have used excessive force in violation of your constitutional rights, the current law of qualified immunity limits the likelihood that you or your family can recover money damages for the harm caused by a police officer. And basically, qualified immunity just shields police from ever being held accountable in federal court or to pay for the harm that was caused by their unconstitutional conduct. And so if people in Virginia are going to be able to hold the police accountable to pay for the damages for the harm that they've caused by excessive use of force or other unconstitutional conduct, the Virginia Legislative Assembly needed to pass a law that would allow people to sue Virginia police in Virginia courts under Virginia law. And they had this option to do so. Colorado just passed the same exact bill. So this is not something that's new. It's not something that we were just going to be the first state to do, but it was something that was identified as a really critical reform when it came to police accountability. And so, I think it was really disappointing to kind of hear all the arguments such as, and just to overall, it got out of the House. So, Delegate Bourne was the lead patron and, the bill got resurrected several times. The community really pushed, this coalition pushed a lot of partners on this call pushed, and we were able to get the bill passed by just a couple of votes. And it took a lot of work. And then it went on to Senate Judiciary. And at that point, the Senate version of the qualified immunity bill had died, and they had weeks to figure out what their questions were. They knew this was going through the House. They knew how passionate the community was fighting for it. And in Senate Judiciary, the bill died. And so that was really disappointing for us to see, because some of the arguments, quite frankly, are, in my opinion, just did not make sense, were untrue. And it became a lot about values. And when you think about values—
What were some of those arguments, Ashna?
Yeah, I think one of them was ending qualified immunity is too complicated. Other states have done this successfully, and it provides a clear roadmap for Virginia. I think our state lawmakers can decide if it is a good enough defense or not. We're not even talking about the opportunity that now automatically you can sue the police, and all of a sudden we're going to have all these cases where police are held accountable. All we're asking for is the ability to have their day in court. And that is very minimal. And the fact that we said that was too complicated, it is too complicated if your rights are violated for you to have your day in court. That to me is really concerning when we're talking about values, especially if we're talking about racial justice and we know who the system is working for and who it isn't. They said that ending qualified immunity would hurt an officer's ability to make difficult split-second decisions. We are not trying to prevent officers from making those decisions. All we're saying is that when officers act unreasonably without a genuine threat to their safety, they would be subject to a lawsuit. The Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures. So an officer's reasonable use of force would still be in line with the Constitution. So all we're saying is when you do something wrong, that you're going to be held accountable for it. And that will help with the culture and having, individuals realize that they are not immune to any lawsuit or to being held accountable or to any individual. The other thing is that, I want to point out 60% of cases always end in the favor of police. And so there was this idea now, all of a sudden, no one would want to come to the police, recruitment would be low. I think we need to think hard about, that argument kept coming up. Well, one, who are we recruiting and what values do those individuals hold? And if you're telling me that someone who's coming into the force is scared that they're going to be held accountable for, violating somebody else's constitutional rights, that is really concerning to me, that those are the individuals we want coming into the police force. And very quickly, I think it would be another argument that was used was that there would suddenly be an increase of all the number of lawsuits and the fiscal impact would be so great that the state could not pay on it. I mean, I just want to talk about from a values perspective, how are we trying to say that, Black lives do not matter and that the price tag is too high? Is that what our lawmakers are really trying to make from a value standpoint? And then from also just looking at how other states have gone about it, it's just not nearly as significant as it has been presented. The Attorney General coming out and saying that they're going to need 12 additional attorneys to handle the extra caseload. Well, my concern is the fact that we think that there's so many unconstitutional violations that we're needing to then hire 12 additional attorneys to do that. And where the police is supposed to serve to protect the community, that we are going to be generating $2.6 million in constitutional violations in Virginia in 1 year, that to me is concerning. And so, the pretext to all of this is that really it was disappointing that they didn't take it on. Community really wanted it, and it was very difficult to get out of the House. And it's sad to hear, but I feel like we're going to have to go back to step one when it comes to 2021, because it's going to be, again, this political fight on what the language is when, honestly, it's let people have their day in court. I don't think anyone should be opposed to that. And so, that's a little bit about it. I do want to emphasize again, this is a clear racial justice issue. And to me, this would be one of the most progressive reforms that we can pass to hold police accountable and stop this culture of everyone feeling like they are, have a shield and they can't be held responsible for what they've done.
Yeah, thank you, Ashna. Yeah, this is probably like the most important piece of legislation that could have passed, in my opinion. And it was very disappointing when it failed and so quickly in the Senate. We can have all the laws we want, but if there's no accountability, then you know. So
If I could just, I want to chime in on that. Oh goodness, Princess, I'll let you go ahead and then I'll chime in as well.
Okay, and I won't be long, but Ashnae, I definitely agree with everything you said, and I think somebody said earlier that there's a connection between everything that we're talking about here right now. Okay, so even when I went back and talking about the Marcus alert, Senator Jeremy McPike, his version of the bill called for there to be MOUs, memorandums of understanding for every localities. And I stressed to him very directly how dangerous that was, because you go from Henrico to Chesterfield to Richmond to Newport News, and your results are going to be completely different. They don't want change. And that's why they have given us smoke. Now, I understand that the pretextual stops. I am very thrilled about that. Okay, but I am not okay with them continuously throwing us crumbs and expecting for us to have a darn party about it. Okay, the Democratic Party, I'm going to say it again, they are the majority in the House, the Senate, and the governor is a Democrat. So what does that mean? Let's translate, people. They had the ability to pass this bill if they really wanted to, but they did not want to. They are not the courageous leaders that they put themselves out to be. They are not the progressive leaders that they put themselves out to be. So January is right around the corner. What is going to change from now into January? I'm a realist, okay? Not a thing is going to change in that short period of time. So then we have to get to the point to say, what is it that we can do? Where does our power lie? And blue and red are not our only options. The Democratic Party here in the state of Virginia have shown us who they are. And we, if we're smart, we're going to believe them. It is time for the rise of a strong independent party, because again, the Democratic Party, this was their petri dish. They had all of the big cards. They had multiple queens on the chessboard, and they decided to go ahead and sell the people out and take the path of least resistance. If you value Black lives, if you value the voices and the lives of the voices of those that are unheard too often, then you will wisen up. Okay, and accountability is not just for our police departments. We got to look at our jury sentencing as well. Okay, there are so many areas that need to be covered, and to say we made a little bit of progress and that progress does not protect Black lives, okay, is a shame. And we, the people, have to get out of that oppressed state of mind and to say that we deserve better than the crumbs, that we are going to do whatever we need to do to claim the full course meal.
Can I chime in on that? I want to echo what you're saying.
I think Valerie wanted to make a point real quick, and then I'll circle back to you. We do have a couple of other things we need to talk on too. So go ahead.
If what you're going to say is going to piggyback directly on what Princess just said, I will let you go, because I want to go back to tying the failure of qualified immunity to CRB. That's where I want to go with this, because I want to just really drive home.
I'll just give a really quick example of exactly what Princess was saying. So there are two bills that were meant to reduce mass incarceration this year directly: earned sentence credits by Delegate Don Scott, and then compassionate release. I think Don also sponsored that. And so he went in saying, people who are serving time ought to have second chances, and let's give DOC the opportunity to determine who is rehabilitating themselves and let them get out early. So here's what the House delegates did. They took that bill and they started saying, okay, fine, but we have to exclude all violent crimes. Well, we have to exclude all gun crimes. We have to exclude all sex crimes. We have to exclude all drug dealing crimes. And also we need to wait at least make sure this person's serving at least 5 years. So now you have a bill where people who are serving 5 years for a property offense or drug possession are the only people who can get extra earned sentence credits. That's basically no one. And then you have Democratic leaders who'll take the stage at Black Lives Matter events and tell you that they've passed an earned sentence credits bill. And they'll do the same thing with this compassionate release bill. If you look at that one, it's even more of a joke. I would be surprised if one person every year gets compassionate release based on this reform that they passed. It's infuriating to watch it happen. And more people need to speak up about it. Absolutely.
Thanks for that, Brad. And you know what? Now I want to piggyback just a little bit on what you shared. It's like, as I was listening to the floor conversation back and forth on the compassionate release bill, You know, I was listening to the Democrat side, Senator Morsi and others. They would talk about how, you know, someone who has a terminal illness and all of these reasons why someone, regardless of their what they were convicted of, regardless of why they were in prison, why they should be released. And then I would hear the other side come back and create the worst case scenario you could possibly imagine, and then say, well, we couldn't possibly allow someone who has been given, you know, such a short time to live because, you know, they could just bounce right back, and then they're out and they're killing people and they're raping people, and I want to be able to protect my family. I have never heard such outrageous madness tossed about as if, you know, we're literally just saying throw open the doors and it doesn't matter whether someone has, you know, caused harm or not, just let them all run free. It was outrageous to hear and infuriating. And then the watering down until we get to something that almost has zero efficacy, right? It doesn't do anything, which is the other, you know, that is just as damning if you ask me. You know, if you have something that has power and you have opposition to it, then you build the base to get it through. You don't water it down until you pass something that has zero authority, that has zero power. And that's unfortunately what we've done with a couple. But I want to get back to the qualified immunity, because, you know, when qualified immunity failed, you know, I have been watching the chat and I have heard Bakura and others talk about, you know, well, you know, you still have the opportunity to sue. It is just going to be more difficult. You know, when qualified immunity failed, what it basically said is, you know, there is a standard that you have got to reach in order to bring charges against an officer to try to say that this officer has done something so egregious. And that standard is so high that it's almost impossible to reach. So even with the civilian review panel that is, you know, going to find all of these horrible things that police officers have done, with qualified, they're shielded. It's almost like they get to look around the shield and say, and you still can't touch me. And so they're tied together inextricably. And if you give one without the other, you have just kind of given us something lopsided. And so then what, we're going to walk with a limp? We don't want a limp anymore. We don't want to limp anymore. So yeah, that's the point that I wanted to make. I wanted to raise the point that one of our viewers has raised, but then put it into context. You still not given us anything.
Thank you.
Exactly. I just want to come back off that, because even if a judge thinks, right, well, one, because of qualified immunity, lawyers are more likely to not bring about these cases, right? Because the chances are minimal to none. And then secondly, even if a judge thinks that your constitutional rights were violated, there have been so many egregious officers who've gotten away with it because technically, according to the law, the court didn't rule that that exact specific decision that they made was ruled unconstitutional before. So you've got a catch-22 situation, right? And so I just want to emphasize again that what this does is it really brings a culture that really, you know, is one, empowering police to not be held accountable, you know, for their actions, but two, also disempowering, you know, the community to even try to hold, you know, police accountable and get justice for their loved ones and themselves. And so, you know, that's really, it really is one of the most disappointing things that I think really took place in the conversations that took place when values were trying to be negotiated. Accountability, you either have it or you don't. And right now, Virginia officers are not held accountable.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to circle back to you, Valerie, here and have you take the lead on this question here. As the case with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd really brought to national attention the dangers of both no-knock warrants and neck restraints. And that was attempted to be addressed here in the General Assembly. How did that go?
So I know that we did indeed pass the ban on neck restraints and even on no-knock warrants. But again, we got watered down versions, you know. So when you put in and I even understand, even if I were to understand that there may be times when you feel as if perhaps some evidence may be destroyed, and realize all those caveats that I put on it, right? Because I really believe that it is that slim, right? That that 1% chance might come about that you need to get into that apartment or get into that home without knocking. But let's say that it isn't, that's not the case, and that an officer just straight up violates this particular law. And, and then here we are now at the moment of accountability. They still got qualified immunity. So let's be clear that they are so inextricably tied together that unless you are willing to say you aren't allowed to do this and you'll be held accountable if you do it anyway. You have to have the both, and one is not enough. When I talk about lopsided, don't tell me, if you have a child and you tell that child, don't you go into the kitchen and get into that cookie jar. Well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to tell you don't get into the cookie jar. This is the rule of the house. Don't get into the cookie jar. That child is going to go test out the cookie jar, eat the cookie, and didn't I tell you not to get into that cookie jar? Well, you did, but okay, but don't get back into that cookie jar. The child is now bold and goes and gets 2 cookies and eats them in your face, right? So let's be real about what we are empowering bad actors to do here, And I'm not trying to say that all officers are bad actors. I know that they are not. We have many good police officers, if you will, and and some of them are ashamed of that bad acting counterparts and wish that there was something in place that could get rid of them. Well, you know what? Those that want to act anyway can act any kind of way because we have not put into place the systems that will say to them, we will hold you accountable. You better not get into that cookie jar because you will lose your job. You will not have access any longer. And you won't be able to run over to another county and pick up a badge over there and continue your bad actions. Until we get to that point, I'm not too concerned about what you have passed in other instances until we have the level of accountability that is going to make sure that we aren't going to allow them to continue on.
Yeah, I want to dig a little deeper on the neck restraints issue here, because I know that there's two terms that a lot of people kind of get it's used interchangeably, but it doesn't necessarily mean a thing, and that's mean the same thing, and that's chokeholds versus neck restraints. Can anyone on the panel, Valerie, I don't know if you want to take this one, kind of explain the difference and what exactly is the significance of the two and which one was banned?
I do not want to take the lead on that because I am not able to bring to flesh out that distinction very well. Brad, how about you? Can you help me out on that?
I was plugged in while the drafts were being worked out, and then I plugged out or unplugged, I guess. Okay.
I don't know if I am, Asha, I don't know if you have any more clarity. If not, we can circle back to it and clarify later at a later point. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, nothing on my end. I think the biggest thing to note again is how controversial each one of these bills were and how hard it was in the amount of discussions that took place. So again, going back to values and these simple policies that we think should or should not exist. And my understanding is it was a much watered down version that passed as well.
Yeah. So I want to touch on something that Valerie just mentioned, which was, officer, the theory that they're just a couple of bad apples and, other officers don't like to see these bad apples doing things. But every time we see these videos of something happening, we always see that there are other officers standing around not doing anything. There was an effort to hold officers who were witnessing some of these people's rights being violated accountable. How did that go? Did that bill pass? And Ashna, I'll toss it over to you if you're familiar with that one.
We didn't work as much. We worked more on decertification. I do believe something did pass. Brad or Valerie, do you know the details about it?
Yeah, so it was included in the House. Sorry, it was Mark Levine's bill in the House, and it passed the House. It made it over to the Senate. The Senate killed it. Then the Senate passed their omnibus police reform bill, and it made it over to the House, and the House then put it back in the omnibus bill and sent it back over to the Senate, I guess for conference at that point. And then the Senate still didn't do it. Getting back to sort of the ridiculousness of politics, and I understand it wasn't even the policy of it. It was honestly probably something as petty as personalities. And that's the stuff that's going on right now. Just super dumb. Like, you've got basic human rights that are involved here, and they're not passing bills because they don't like each other. I don't get it. So, but that was the fate of that bill. I mean, they winded it down so much again that it did almost nothing. So it was purely symbolic. They took out the misdemeanor crime for not reporting, crime that you see. Then they also made it so that all discipline, any discipline from a police officer's failure to report misconduct by another police officer, all discipline was up to individual police chiefs, could all be dealt with internally, and did not even need to be publicly disseminated. So that the bill was basically, honestly, it was purely symbolic. It was saying, hey, police chiefs, police yourselves, please, do this, and then we won't know about it, but I'm sure you'll take care of it. And they wouldn't even do that. And again, they wouldn't do it because it was, my understanding is there were just personality conflicts between, senators and the bill sponsor and whoever else, and between the Senate and the House. And just shouldn't happen.
And Kofi, I just want to say, I hope that everyone that's on the panel and that's listening can hear the large quantity of bills that kept getting shot down or watered down, during special session. Again, digest that and put together a plan. And what you going to do about it, right? Again, the Democratic Party is failing us because I'm a strong believer that a person will only do what you allow them to do. We have allowed this behavior for too long. And as Einstein says, you can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. That's the definition of insanity. And I know Princess Blandon is far from insane. And I would like to believe that you are not insane either. So again, we got to vote different, and it's time to rise up a strong independent party. But what I wanted to also say on the level of accountability, as an educator, 14 years as an educator, as a teacher, and as an administrator, there is a very, very high level of accountability for us, okay? Accountability if we fail our students regarding those SOLs, which for many people, SOL stands for something else, okay? There's accountability as mandated reporters. There's accountability if we put our hands on the kids, if we speak to them at a certain tone, okay? As a doctor, as a nurse, there's accountability. You give somebody the wrong medicine, you're out of there with a big lawsuit. But when it comes to the police officers, okay, when we come to this racist system, there's no accountability. And we have no courageous leaders that's willing to take on this battle. They only want to go to path of least resistance for their own personal and political reasons. When we sit there and we look at the uprise, nobody stood up for the people. We saw the police tear gassing people, pushing people down, abusing people, and none of our legislators took a stand for the people. How much clearer does the water need to be? It's time for some major changes, okay? They are failing us, and they're mostly very drastically failing the Black people. And I tell myself, what keeps me going is the murder of my brother will not be in vain. I've been called to fight a fight that I will not lose, okay? And it's time for people, Black, white, green, and purple, to jump on that bandwagon and to see, again, what happened during special session is a clear example. Police reform only got put on there. Let me say it again. It only got put on the docket because of the uprise. That means all of this is disingenuous. They're not doing it because it's what they really believe in. They're doing it because fear was pricked in them when the people started to uprise. So let that show you that we, the people, have a lot of power, and we need to keep on using it because, again, the Democratic Party is going to continue to fail us if we allow them to.
Thanks, Princess. Thank you. Want to wrap things up a little bit, talk about decertification and training. Ashna, I know that's something that the ACLU worked a lot on. Would you mind explaining what was accomplished on that front?
Yeah, I want to emphasize what Princess said with accountability, right? So teachers, lawyers, doctors all risk the ability to lose their, ability to practice for serious misconduct. And that's not the true for the police. And so when we think about decertification and what it means to be decertified is not that you're fired, is not that you're just let go. It means that you are unable to, be a police officer anywhere else. And so Virginia has only contributed decertified 33 officers in the last decade. That's less than 1% that the country, when you look at all of the decertifications that have gone across the country. So factually speaking, we know that this isn't working. Right now, the lax policing law meant that there was no real accountability, and that if you were engaged in excessive use of force or any sort of misconduct, unethical conduct, that you were able to then leave that police department and go join another police department in another jurisdiction. And what we found is a lot of these police officers that we then hear about in the news, like who was a part of this terrible misconduct and racist misconduct, it's usually police officers who aren't doing it for the first time. And so decertification was able to move forward. Right now, there's multiple bills that are going to be going to the governor's desk. But I want to make it very clear that the passage or the signage of any one of these bills does not mean that we have won any fight. Because right now, there is going to be a working group established to help define what serious misconduct means when we talk about decertification. And the Department of Criminal Justice Service Boards has 280 days to create these standards. And they need to define what is serious misconduct, and we need to make sure that that includes violations of use of force or excessive use of force, lying, misconduct, all on the job. So right now, if the bills are on going to the governor's desk, that would allow for police officers to be decertified for serious misconduct, but yet we still need to define what that looks like. And so really, I again want to urge that until we see what those definitions are, until we see who's a part of that working group and what community members are involved and who they are listening to, that passage and that signage, when the governor decides to pass that part of Senate Bill 5030 or several of the House bills that contain the decertification language, then only after we see what those definitions look like, can we really think about if this is really going to hold police accountable or not. And I urge that so much because, that's part of the process is that, you can sign something into law, but if the law says, hey, we're going to go to DCJS, and ask them to define what serious misconduct looks like, we better be keeping our eyes on what that is and be involved in the process to shape that, because that will really determine if the bill truly and the law truly has teeth and will hold, police accountable or not. And so, that I think this is going to be a long process. A lot of people are painting it as a victory. I am not convinced until I see what the definition of serious misconduct is, how they're defining use of force, and how they're defining unethical behavior.
All right. So we're getting close to the end of the program here. I believe we answered all of the questions that were in the chat, and I think we've covered a lot. Probably didn't cover everything, but we've covered quite a bit.
Okay.
So what I will ask each of our panelists right now to do is to maybe kind of put you on the spot here. Give a grade, give our General Assembly a grade. How did they do on police reform? And what do we need to do going forward? Ashna, I'll start with you.
Give them a grade and what we
Right.
need to do going forward. I mean, it's hard for me to, look, I think that we've established that not a lot was done when it comes to racial justice and police reform. And I want to be able to work with people in 2021 to pass actual true reform and accountability. So, I don't even think, I mean, it's hard.
Did I put you on the spot?
Come on, Ashna, get it together.
B-minus.
I mean,
You want to give it incomplete?
an incomplete, you haven't done your job. That's what I'm going to say. You haven't done your job. An incomplete, I think there's a lot of work to still be done. Today, earlier, someone was asking me this, and I said, I don't think there's been anything that's done. So incomplete. You didn't even finish your exam, is my point.
Gotcha. Brad, how about you?
Okay. Oh, well, I'm not going to chicken out, but I'm going to give you an incomplete also. And the reason is because, in my opinion, one of the most important bills is up in the House tomorrow, and that's jury sentencing reform, SB 5007. We haven't talked much about it tonight, but there's something called the trial penalty in the United States. It's really what drives mass incarceration. It gives, it's basically when the government has so much power that they can make the consequences of losing a trial so severe that any reasonable person would plead guilty, even innocent people. The main component of that in Virginia is called mandatory jury sentencing. We are one of 2 states that still has mandatory jury sentencing, and the other one is Mitch McConnell's Kentucky, the same place that refused to indict the murderers of Breonna Taylor. That's the company we're keeping. We are behind Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, you name it. 48 states, we're behind them. And as a result, here's what happens in Virginia. Last year, 24,648 people were sentenced for felonies in Virginia. Guess how many of those people were convicted by a jury? 287. That's 1.2% of felony convictions in Virginia that are achieved by a jury trial. There is no longer a right to a jury trial in Virginia because of mandatory jury sentencing. And if we get rid of mandatory jury sentencing, do you know what happens? Plea agreements become much more reasonable. People who are actually innocent get to have their day in court and get to be acquitted. All prison sentences across the board, I guarantee it, will be reduced. And you will see the accompanying reductions in racial disparities in the justice system, because as we all know, Black Latinx people are subject to the influence of mass incarceration more than anyone else. If they pass the reform of mandatory jury sentencing, I got to give them I think I give them actually a decent grade. I know that's going to sound lame. I think they could have done a lot more. But if they don't, I consider the session a failure. I hate to say it, even with the pretextual policing bill, which I love. And I think I would qualify that by saying this. I think the grades are mixed because there are lots of delegates who absolutely rule. I absolutely love how hard to bat that Don Scott has been going for progressive criminal justice reform. I love what Patrick Hope has been doing for us this session. There are so many people who have been so influential and so Jeff Bourne has been fighting hard. Lamont Bagby has been fighting hard. There's been so many people who have been trying to do such a good job. And then there's just a part of the Democratic Party that doesn't want to go along for the ride, that don't believe in this. They're the people who show up at Black Lives Matter rallies. They hold up their signs. And then a week after that, they're trying to kill your bills, get rid of your earned sentence credits, get rid of your qualified immunity. And they can't bring themselves to do anything that truly matters in the lives of Black Virginians. So, you know what? I give an A to a lot of these folks. I give an F to a lot of these folks. And I think for many of them, the grade is incomplete, and we'll find out tomorrow.
All right, Brad has a future in politics. No, thank you, Valerie. How about you? Would you grade them, and where do you think we go from here?
So before I give the grade, I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to start at the core. The core of what we needed to accomplish was qualified immunity, because we needed to bring down that ivory wall that protected bad behavior. And then right on the outside of that ivory wall was basically, in my opinion, the duty to report. So that way, you have to tell on that bad actor when they are acting poorly. And the fact that they created a system where, you know what, we'll just allow y'all to govern yourself on this. We already know how that's going, right? It's not working. And so that's the best that they could do. And then they threw the breadcrumbs, right? We've got a little bit of the pretextual stops, and we've got the passage of the, the CRB. So the breadcrumbs, they may lead us to what we want, but then once we get there, we didn't get anything, right? So in my opinion, they have failed us. We have been failed by the special session, and I can agree that there have been some champions who have fought very hard and who will continue to fight on our behalf. But the champions, unless we have a unified front fighting on our behalf, I don't want one or two. I want a party that is going to work for us and is going to accomplish for us what we need. And what special session has done at this point has thrown out a couple of breadcrumbs and then failed. Where do we go from here? We continue to work with those who are willing to do those things that we need to get done in 2021. And then, we can continue to grade, right? We have to work with those folks who will do something, because we need to know who really will stand up for the people. And folks have got to be able to stand up regardless. The way that Delegate Corey stood and refused to back down on those budget amendments, I can get behind that. And knowing that she's going to bring them back, I can get behind that. Delegate Hope, indeed, he did. He fought hard. But that I can only name a couple, that's sad, right? And I could name a couple more, but it's a sad thing that I can count on one or two hands the number of individuals who fought hard and who continued to stay the course and did not sell out the value for compromise. So the General Assembly session failed us. This special session failed us.
All right, thanks, Valerie. Princess? I have a feeling I know what you're agreeing.
Come on now. You called me last on purpose. I'm telling you, you did. Okay?
I'm just going in the order of my view here.
Okay. I'm only going to speak truth to power. So I'm going to start off by saying I'm an educator. Okay. And as educators, we grade you based off of what you did do. Okay. So let's talk about what they did do. The other thing that I'm going to say is that I'm a school administrator. Okay. And I know that we get graded as a school as a whole, not just based off of one teacher passing our students and doing great. We get graded as a school and as a school division. So this Democratic Party is going to get graded as a whole, and they have failed us. They have intentionally failed us. And I say that with receipts. When I speak to them, when I have documented conversations with them via email, they knew what they were doing. Okay. And so when you know better, you do better. You're expected to do better. And, there have been individuals who have been doing, I give an amazing job. I give Delegate Bourne a lot of kudos because he has fought very hard. He could have fought harder. We all can, right? However, as a whole, the Democratic Party has intentionally, there was no accident in this, they intentionally failed us. And so they get an F. And when we talk about where do we go from there, like, why do we give them an F as a report card overall? And then we keep saying, let's keep voting for them, right? Look how hard our schools are being scrutinized, right? When our schools start failing our kids and it keeps happening, we're ready to shut them down, discredit them and everything else. But the Democratic Party, who has the ability to save, and to preserve Black lives and to push for Black liberation and to push for community care and safety to be first and always, and to prioritize our needs, they can fail us, but we're going to keep letting them say we the people party, vote for us, right? So again, we have to get to the point where we value ourselves higher, okay? And where we say that we demand more than the crumbs. So they get an F. And as far as where we go from here, it is time for the rise of a strong independent party, because for over 400 years, we've been waiting for champions. And that champion has been presented to us as the Democratic Party. And they continuously show us who they are. And Princess Blandon believes them.
Thank you, Princess. Thank you for speaking your truth. I'm going to echo a lot of the sentiments, that have been already been stated. It's definitely a failing grade, and like what everyone said, it's because of the lack of accountability. We can pass some of these new laws. A lot of them even were watered down, but without the accountability piece, there's no trust that they will be held accountable to actually follow these new guidelines. So that was really, it was really gut wrenching to see that all of the measures on the accountability front were really were killed. And the worst part is, like I said, there really was no opposition. There was no reason for not holding police accountable. That was the rallying cry. That's what people were marching through the streets for. And to see people such a failure on that front was really painful to watch and to witness. I really do appreciate everyone taking their time out of their evening to be here tonight. Thank you to all of our panelists, Princess Blanding, Valerie Slater, Brad Haywood, and Ashna Khanna, ACLU, Justice Forward, Rise for Youth, the Activated People, and Justice and Reformation. You guys did a great job, really informative, and I hope our audience felt the same way. Thank you for joining. I hope we're going to continue to put up this fight, and we're going to continue to communicate with everyone in the weeks and months going forward. Have a great evening.